Hello everybody and welcome, thank you, I'm No02. This is going to be the third installment of our new player guide for multiplayer in Iron Harvest. We talked briefly, very briefly, just about very standard, safe, simple opening that all factions can do. Right, the 2-1 Iron Oil opening with a grenade. Always grab that grenade. In the last video we talked a little bit about the economy, some very simple knowledge about the economy. Again, 2-1 oil is very standard. 2-1 oil upgrades, again standard to keep our money as equal as possible, or relative to each other as possible. And potentially going for a 3-2 iron oil upgrade if they have that luxury. In this we're going to be talking about combat and retreating, all the basic knowledge you're going to need for that, and how combat and retreating relates to economy as well. Again, just all simple concepts. Regardless of what faction I'm playing, this applies to all of the other factions. And the very first thing that we're going to be talking about here is actually the squad models themselves. As far as their HP, bullets, their physics, and a models. And what a model is, right? I might say the word model and you have no idea what I'm talking about. So we're just going to do the simple, same thing. 2-1
We'll do it. Yeah. Fine.
What's the plan then?
iron opening.
Moving to
2-1 iron oil.
We're on it.
We'll get our grenade.
What is it?
But
We'll do
beyond
it.
this,
Yeah.
right?
Fine.
We're not really going to do anything else.
Look sharp now. Ready.
We'll get our grenade.
Set.
You have orders?
Notice the squad. It has 500 HP total. There's 5 models. Each one of these little dudes, right?
New orders for us?
And all of these squads. That is a model. The individual member of the squad is referred to as a model.
Uh-huh.
Each model has their own health pool
Need something done?
of 100 HP, right? 5 models,
Careful
100
how you
HP
stole
each,
them.
is how we get the total 500 HP. Now, because each of those individual models has their own health pool, when they get shot, the bullet is hitting an individual model. So even though it's ticking away at the squad's total health, a model can get all the way down to 1 health and then continue to live during a fight. Because in this game, all bullets and projectiles have physics. So the bullet that you see physically coming out of a gun can be blocked by your own squads or hit terrain and things like that, keeping your units safe. Each unit also has their own gun, as you can see, and reload time. They'll shoot their gun, empty their clip, and then they'll reload. And that's different for all the squads. So because... I'm trying to get rid of here. Come on, Grenadier.
Orders?
So because each model has their own health, their own gun, each model will shoot their own bullet, and that own bullet will do its damage. So when it comes to very simple combat knowledge, more models means more DPS. Theoretically, this squad could go all the way down to 5 HP, with each model holding 1 HP. And that 5 HP squad still does maximum damage. Now, granted, that would be unbelievably rare, but sort of just to emphasize the point. So when it comes to simple fights, smaller fights where you can pretty easily or quickly count models, a good rule of thumb is, almost regardless of what the health bar says of each unit involved in the fight, if you have more models, you have more DPS, and the chances of you winning that fight are greater. So that's one great rule of thumb is, do I have more models? I'm probably going to win.
Standing by.
And that's sort of like the basic fundamental of all the units. Even the big mechs that are just an individual unit. Same thing, right? I mean, they don't have extra models, but the one model unit has this much HP. It shoots a bullet that has a projectile, it can be blocked. Now each unit has a retreat button, right? The default hotkey is R.
Orders?
When units are retreating, they take 50% less damage.
Ready.
So the riflemen shoot a bullet that does 12 damage. 12, 12, 12.
Grenadiers ready.
If I'm shooting a unit that's retreating,
Ready for action.
that 12 points of damage is reduced to 6 damage. Also, squads that are retreating return back to
Standing
base
by.
with slightly
away.
more movement speed, like a tiny bit of movement speed boost.
Ready. Orders?
Now, when it comes to combat, it
Moving
is
out.
closely tied to the economy. The reason why we're going double iron, one oil for our opening, and then we get other things, we need that double iron ticking away because it's safer.
Ready.
Because infantry costs iron to heal and reinforce.
Standing
So whether
by.
your plan is to be aggressive or to be defensive, either way, if combat is happening, you're going to want 2 irons at the very least to keep your squads healthy and on the field.
Orders?
So that's why 2 iron, 1 oil is it's safe. Safe regardless of what happens in the match.
Grenadiers
Now when it comes
ready.
to getting ahead of your opponent economically, there's 3 things that you really want to keep in mind. And it's shoot, steal, upgrade. If I shoot
Orders?
my opponent's units, every single bullet, every bit of damage that I do will cost him iron and potentially oil, depending on the unit, in order for him to repair and reinforce. The next is steal, right? Take his resource nodes, flip them, make them neutral, take them ourselves, and make sure that we have more upgrades than them, or to get our upgrades faster.
With Polania.
Now it's important to note that the order of importance there, when it comes to impacting the economy in our favor, shoot, steal, upgrade is an order of importance. So shooting and doing damage is the most impactful thing that we can do. Stealing is second. Having more upgrades is third.
Standing by. Orders?
Another simple concept to remember is traded damage and free damage. Something you don't need to think too heavily about, but this is in the simplest terms, right? We always want to fight in engagements where we have more units. That's not always the case, right? And we'll in a later video discuss the more advanced concepts and tactics of moving around a map and fighting. But if we have one squad fighting one enemy squad, we're going to refer to that as traded damage, because both squads are dealing damage to each other. So he's hurting us economically, we're hurting him economically. And regardless of who ends up winning that fight, the difference is going to be fairly insignificant as far as healing that squad back up. The significance could be found if we win a fight and now we get to capture a mine. That's a little bit different. But from looking at it from a squad to squad perspective, traded damage is going to be not super significant. Now we have 2 squads fighting one squad, right? One squad is trading with the enemy squad. That second squad that's fighting, that's all free damage. And as you might imagine, free damage is when we get to do damage without receiving damage. So you're always going to be wanting to look for those situations. Shooting a squad that's capturing a resource node is great. We want that all day long. So don't panic if an enemy is capturing your iron mine, right? He's capturing it. Maybe he even flips it or captures it himself. If you get free shots on him while he's doing that, and especially if those shots result in you getting to win a 1v fight against that squad, forcing him to retreat it or just send it back home or send it somewhere else, the time lost from an iron mine is going to be pretty insignificant, because dealing damage to a squad is more impactful to the economy.
Orders?
Now in bigger fights where there might be lots of squads involved, it might be a little bit harder to tell who's going to win or lose. A good rule of thumb is to increase your chances to win that fight in general is actually going to be to retreat as late as possible. Because again, each model has its own DPS. So as a squad is getting lower in health, models are dying, its DPS is dropping off. But the longer you can keep a unit in a fight and then retreat it and it still get away safely, is going to maximize your DPS for that fight. And so even though you might be able to not tell who's going to win or lose in a fight, that's a good rule of thumb. Is just retreat as late as possible and retreat individual units. You don't want
Grenadiers
to
ready.
box your whole army and retreat it at once. If one squad is dying, you want to retreat squads one at a time. If there's a big mess of things and you
Ready
can't
for action.
individually click on a squad, you can just look at the bottom bar. Squads that are in combat will have a combat symbol
Ready.
on them. See if they
Kill them
do it. If they
fast.
see, they get a little crosshair. So you can sort of see which squads are fighting. You can even box the army that's fighting,
Quick.
see what's highlighted, and then left click on the individual squad and then retreat that one squad. So you don't accidentally retreat your whole army, because that can be a pretty big blunder to have.
Moving out.
And that's it. That's it for all the basic combat that we're going to be covering here today, right? Just you got to remember that if you have more models, you have more DPS, which means your chances of winning are greater. You want to retreat as late as possible to maximize your DPS in bigger fights. You want to look for opportunities to do free damage, not just traded damage. Oh, and one last thing I wanted to talk about too.
Orders.
Imagine a big army was walking in. 3 enemy squads were coming in,
Ready for action.
threatening my iron mine. My reinforcements are not close enough, or I don't have enough reinforcements nearby to hold it off.
Standing by.
We don't really want to do a 3v1 fight, right? That's too much free damage for our opponent.
Ready.
So
We'll
don't be
get there
afraid to
quick.
back up and just leave. Because what happens is if you try and fight for it, trying to fight a losing battle, you're going to lose the battle anyways, take all that damage on your squads, and then still end up losing the mine.
Extraction is ongoing.
Standing by.
So don't be afraid to just walk
On the way.
backwards. Walk back a little bit. Don't retreat it, right? Just walk a little bit away, gather your forces,
Moving out.
and then push back in.
Ready for action.
That's a great habit to get into. Because again, right,
We'll get there quick.
in the order of importance, losing a mine,
Hi-ho.
not a huge deal if you lose a mine for 10, 20 seconds. Not a big deal. Taking 80, 90% damage on a squad, though,
Grenadiers ready.
way more impactful. Especially if that squad doesn't do 80 or 90 damage to an enemy squad, right?
Standing by.
So don't panic if you're losing something.
Yes.
Just back it up, regroup, then retake it.
Orders.
And that will help you stay ahead economically. Especially to remember, if there's 3 squads here and they want to threaten this,
Extraction is
one of
ongoing.
one of those squads has to capture this iron mine. Now leaving only 2 squads to fight. So potentially that is an opportunity for you to get the advantage
Ready.
and win that fight. And so that's it. More models means more DPS, you might win. Retreat as late as possible to maximize your DPS in a big fight. Back up instead of retreating if you don't, because you don't want to take unfavorable engagements. Because you want to look for opportunities to do free damage, not take free damage. And just remember the order of importance for economy, right? It's shoot, steal, upgrade. If you want to hurt your opponent's economy the most or immediately, you want to shoot things. Stealing is second, having more upgrades sooner is third. In the next video, we're going to be discussing concepts of goals as far as like being aggressive or being defensive, as well as looking at oil timings, which will sort of be the foundation of how we conceive a build in itself. So we'll be discussing those general ideas in the next video. In the video after that, we will then get into actually coming up with a build and executing it and talking about why it's a build and why it makes sense. All right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.